So now we move to the part of the evening that everyone has been looking forward to, and frankly is why everybody has attended this evening's event. It's our discussion with Chris Johnston, Marilyn, Truscott and Duncan Marshall about the newly minted charter. I'll just introduce our speakers. Chris Johnston is an Australian heritage consultant who specialises in investigating the special meanings and associations that exist between communities and their places, and has a national profile for her work in this area. Chris is a founding member of the National Scientific Committee and co-editor of the Australia ICOMOS Practice Note on ICH and Place, and has led Australia ICOMOS's response to drafts of the proposed ICOMOS Charter on ICH. She's the founder of Context, now part of the GML Heritage Group, and an honorary research associate at La Trobe University. Thank you for this evening. Dr. Marilyn Truscott is a heritage practitioner with degrees in archaeology, history and materials conservation. She's currently researching community and heritage management, having had a long career focusing on local associations and the meanings of place. Marilyn has worked as a museum curator, archaeologist, senior government official and consultant, and has worked in Australia, the Middle East, Europe, Southern Africa and the Asia Pacific. Marilyn is a past president of the ICOMOS International Committee on Intangible Cultural Heritage and past president of Australia ICOMOS. It's a pleasure to have you with us this evening, Dr. Truscott. And Duncan Marshall, a heritage architect and consultant with a long involvement in the work of ICOMOS within Australia and internationally. He has an interest in the philosophy and practice of heritage conservation, including charters and other doctrine, and then was involved in previous reviews of the Borough Charter. So we're thrilled to hear from you as well, Duncan. So now I will pass over to you, Chris, to kick off this keynote.
Thank you. And I will kick off by sharing my screen. Hopefully that's working well. Look, thank you for this opportunity, Alex and everyone. And thank you for the acknowledgement of country that you provided. I'd just like to acknowledge the elders of the country that I live and work on, the Jara people in central Victoria, and of course, elders across the many countries that we're meeting on virtually this evening. Since UNESCO adopted its Convention on Intangible Cultural Heritage in 2003, there's been much debate in ICOMOS about the connections between intangible cultural heritage, ICH, and tangible heritage. And as Alex said just a few days ago, really, at the ICOMOS General Assembly in Brazil, ICOMOS adopted for the first time an international charter and guidance on sites with intangible cultural heritage. We expect that those documents will be uploaded very soon on the ICOMOS website. So in our presentation this evening, Duncan Marshall will speak briefly about the purpose and role of ICOMOS charters. I'll outline something of the history of this new international charter and what's in the charter, and then Marilyn will reflect on ICH in Australia and how we might benefit from a new charter. And then we'll close with a few final points. And if there's time, which I hope there will be, some questions from you, comments or reflections on how a charter might help us in Australia advance heritage practice here. So first, can I hand over to Duncan?
Thank you, Chris, and hello, everyone. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from Ngunnawal country, and also acknowledge other families and people with connections to this country as well. And I'd also like to, I think there are a few long neglected ICOMOS colleagues in this Zoom who I'd also like to say a sort of fond greeting to. So hello to you. I'm going to provide a very short general overview of the context about ICOMOS doctrine, charters, but not just. ICOMOS has a lot of charters, plus guidance, plus resolutions, plus declarations. And here on the screen in front of you is a list of charters and other guidance. And, you know, there are a few that I might just highlight for reference. So back in 1964, when I was 5 years old, there was the Venice Charter. I wasn't present at that meeting when it was adopted, I hasten to add. I couldn't get a passport on my own account. 1981, there was the first of the, I guess, thematic charters that was adopted by ICOMOS, the Florence Charter dealing with historic gardens. There's the guidelines for education and training, so a break away from charters to a different kind of document called guidelines. And then there are a whole bunch of other charters and other guidelines dealing with interpretation or presentation of cultural heritage sites, cultural roots. There are principles for industrial heritage adopted with TICI. And, there are also things like the last document on that list, the Antarctic Archaeological Guidelines, which or proposed by the Polar Heritage Committee. And plus, of course, there is a glaring omission from this, and no doubt this list will be updated. There's, of course, the new Intangible Cultural Heritage Charter. Next slide, please. Then I wanted to share with you also that there are other sorts of doctrine, resolutions and declarations, and these are just a sample, and I won't dwell on these particularly. There are probably actually more than this loitering around the archives of ICOMOS, but they give you a sense that there's a fair bit of work that goes into producing various sorts of documents within the ICOMOS universe. So the next slide. There is some structure to ICOMOS doctrine, you'll be pleased to know. And this table deals with 4 types of documents: charters, principles, guidelines, and other documents. And so we're not dealing with resolutions and declarations necessarily in this table. And you can see that there's some attempt to provide structure and guidance about what the various types and how they're adopted, their length, and so on. If we go to the next slide, please. The one row, or the one bit of information in this table that might be of some interest to people, is to understand the different aims of these various documents. And just to look at charters, for example, the aim is standard setting texts, formulating policy and practices relevant to heritage and conservation in general, or a specific type of heritage. And then there are aims set out for principles, guidelines, and other documents. This is just giving you a super quick overview of the doctrinal universe within ICOMOS, but I just wanted to finish with a few observations of my own, because I've been watching this process for a little while now, the development and adoption of these various doctrinal texts. And in part, it seemed to me that the blossoming of guidance is partly as a result of the steadfast determination by some within the ICOMOS family not to revise the cast in bronze, carved in stone, and will never change according to ability, or the immutability of the Venice Charter is perhaps one of the reasons why Australia decided to go off and develop the Borough Charter, which you may think work for our local context. It also occurs to me that the growth of doctrine also is, and I probably should have a chart, mapping, when ISCs were formed and when charters were adopted, and so kind of whether the growth in both is a parallel diagram, as it were. I do and I have in the past worried about the growth of doctrine in terms of its use doctrine, as I'm sure those of you involved in the ICH charter are well aware, and having thrown all that energy in, I kind of wonder a little bit about whether ICOMOS is getting good value out of those charters, because I sometimes muse that within Australia, for example, it's sometimes hard enough to get people to pick up the Borough Charter, let alone one of the other 22 other international charters and doctrines that might exist. But I'm also kind of interested in the extent to which such doctrine is practically used, in the sense of there can be overlap between the scope of various doctrine and the extent to which there is consistency between the various doctrine. I mean, if I was a practitioner in Australia, I'd probably be a bit bamboozled about when I use which charter and how, especially what happened if they didn't kind of speak the same language or have a good handshake between each other. I mean, maybe they all beautifully work together. I'm not exactly sure, but insofar as there are now some charters which are quite old, but still in operation, I kind of wonder at the possibility that these charters may promote some wrinkles in practice, as it were, or some gaps in practice which are not necessarily very helpful to anybody. Nonetheless, they shine a spotlight on particular aspects of practice. Perhaps they drag practice forward, give prominence to aspects of our heritage conservation work which is not otherwise getting attention. They perhaps are the leading edge of conservation practice, if I can put it in that way. Nonetheless, there's a lot of good reading there, and may I commend it all to you. Thanks a lot, Chris.
Well, thank you so much, Duncan. What a good lead into our discussion this evening, because we need to ask those questions. Is what we're doing worthwhile? And we can ask the same questions of our own borough charter and our practice notes. Do they all work together? And how effective are they? Do we know about them? Anyway, I won't go on. I won't keep following Duncan's theme, but I think it's a very good one. So it was 2014 when Australia ICOMOS established the National Scientific Committee on Intangible Cultural Heritage, and then 2017 when a practice note on intangible cultural heritage and place was adopted. And these things provided a really strong foundation for Australia ICOMOS to make extensive comments on a draft of the charter that's just been adopted, the International ICH Charter, that was circulated in 2020. As a result, we did make very substantial and very thoughtful comments, and really based on the desire to have the best possible charter. As Duncan said, a lot of energy goes into these charters and we want them to work. As a result, the ICOMOS board referred the draft charter back for revision to a working group headed by Andrew Hall from ICOMOS South Africa to consider Australia's comments and then engage more widely through ICOMOS and its scientific committee, which you've heard of before, the International Committee on Intangible Cultural Heritage, or ICICH. I was appointed as Australia ICOMOS's representative on the working group, joining Marilyn Truscott there and the team that had been developing the charter up till then. And I might say that Marilyn has played a really foundational and continuing role in that process. So how do we manage the relationship between ICH and its interaction with physical heritage place? What tools or guidance do we need? And how do we ensure that the values of ICH to different communities and groups, First Nations people through to recent arrivals, are actually recognised and incorporated into understandings of place and protection of both tangible and intangible attributes? And while ICH is an essential part of understanding cultural heritage, and I suspect everyone on this Zoom would agree, it's still a relatively new area of practice for many heritage professionals, including ICOMOS members. As you can see on the slide, just over 20 years ago, ICOMOS recognised the need to formulate a position on ICH. It's been a long time coming. So that started with the Kimberley Declaration on ICH at the ICOMOS General Assembly in Zimbabwe at Victoria Falls, through to the establishment of the International Scientific Committee, the Quebec Declaration, the Tenmeneng Declaration, a draft charter, more draft charters, and now I should have changed this slide. November 2024 charter adopted, ? Yes. Very good news. As Duncan has outlined in his brief presentation, ICOMOS, through its system of charters and other guidance documents, so doctrine as Duncan called it, ICOMOS is really uniquely placed to provide statements and guidance that clarify practice in this and many different areas of the work of our ICOMOS members in cultural heritage. So for ICOMOS, the first question is always, do we need a charter? Is there enough in all of those other charters that we have? I think there are three core reasons why a charter and why now. ICH is still a relatively new area of practice within ICOMOS. Many professionals who work with heritage places don't have the skills or experience in relation to ICH and place, and there are really complex interactions between tangible and intangible heritage, and it's a relatively unexplored area as yet. So it was with these things in mind that ICOMOS continued to support the development of a charter, even though for ICH, ICOMOS's expert body, this has been a long haul, 20 plus years, with many challenges. And as I said, Marilyn has been a key driver in that whole 20-year process. I'll just outline a few aspects of the charter before raising some considerations for heritage practice. So first, the purpose of the charter. Duncan said charters are about principles, they're about high-level things. So what is the purpose of the charter? Well, this is a very abbreviated set of material from the charter itself. So it's an advocacy document. It's advocating for the recognition of ICH as an integral part of what we would say place-based heritage. It aims specifically to support ICOMOS members as well as other heritage professionals, but it's really there for ICOMOS members, and that's very clear in the charter itself. And it's designed to help us align our work with the 2003 convention, but it doesn't enable us to work under that convention. We're working under our own frameworks of place heritage. The charter has a series of specific objectives that I've put up there on the screen, so you can have a look at them. But there's key principles built in there, like affirming the importance of ICH and its inseparability from other aspects of cultural heritage. And you probably would say these days the culture nature is integrated, and so it's the inseparability within heritage that we need to start thinking about. And how do we work with that? Again, it confirms that we have an obligation to consider ICH. It's not just an extra add-on. It's got to be there and central, and establishes some ethical practice standards for all of us, particularly in how we work with the holders of intangible cultural heritage, communities and cultural groups. So how do we work? How do we work together? And how do we guide and work with heritage authorities? And so often as heritage professionals, we are working not just with communities, but with heritage authorities, and that they need guidance and assistance in this field as well. The last objective is just to recognise that because of the inseparability of these tangible and intangible elements, what is damaging to one is damaging to the other, and that is really important. Three key principles within the charter. So community custodianship. Communities own their intangible cultural heritage, and this is such a challenge for us as professionals. It should be a joyful challenge, but it can be complex. I've worked as a heritage consultant for many decades, and it can be a complex position to be holding. But we need to acknowledge who owns or has the custodianship of cultural heritage. Secondly, that site or place may be integral to the intangible cultural heritage, so integral that it is inseparable. And that third principle, that the community is the primary holder of not just the ICH, but the knowledge about the ICH. Our role is therefore a facilitation role, a helper role, a support role, not the roles that we've been so used to running as heritage professionals in the past. And I think this is probably a truth that needs to extend across all of our heritage work when we're working with communities. which we so often are, I might say. The Charter also provides some guidance across these particular 8 areas, and I won't go into them in detail. But it's important to know that a charter needs to navigate the complexities of professional practice, of community custodianship, of the many charters and guidance that we are all working with, and the individual legislation that is there in each and every country. One of the things about including guidance in the Charter is that it is not normal to include guidance in the Charter. But the working group for this Charter really felt that it was of critical importance because there are so many of our colleagues in ICOMOS who really have not had the opportunity to work overtly with intangible cultural heritage. So to start putting some guidance and some documents, some references in the Charter was seen as really important. I might say that did get a bit of kickback. It was really regarded as, I'm not sure that you should have guidance in there. And so the document itself has kind of got 2 sections. There's a charter section and a guidance section. I might say that terminology was another challenge, including in translation, of course, because the Charter exists in English, French, and Spanish, and hopefully in future in some other languages like Arabic is a top one on the group's list. But intangible cultural heritage itself as a term is such a mouthful, and we had to deal with that. So we've included a glossary of terms so that the way we're using particular terms in this Charter can be understood. And we know from our wide engagement with ICOMOS and ICH members that terminology is really differs internationally, and it's quite important for a Charter to have that kind of glossary. So where to from here? Let's start talking about that. One of the things the Charter does is that it encourages ICOMOS organisations and others across the world to think about what guidance they might need to fit with their legislative systems, their terminology, their language, all of those things. So ICH as an organisation will be encouraging regional documents to develop, and that will be an interesting discussion, I think, as if that starts to happen. Hopefully it will. But ICH itself might want to take some steps as part of ICOMOS to expand the guidance, offer tools and resources, or share tools and resources that particular national groups within ICOMOS are developing. And that could include some of those that Australia has come up with. Illustration is important, like case studies, examples, models. How do you do this? What's a good example? Maybe even what's a terrible example? Can you put those things forward? How do you go about doing it? How do you document intangible cultural heritage, the values and attributes associated with it? Again, case studies and examples. And complex issues legislated or within government policy, such as customary rights, Indigenous cultural and intellectual property, issues that Australia is really currently starting to look at, and hopefully may come up with some very good actions within the next while. Now, I'd like to invite Marilyn to join in as well, if she can, because she's had such a strong role with this Charter and has thought a lot about the kinds of ICH we have in Australia and the breadth of that. So Marilyn, I think you're there and on mic. So if you want to just join in and express your thoughts about Australia and where we might head.
Well, I'll try. Both of you have said so very much, and I'm sort of feeling, well, where am I going to go with all of this? I might go all the way back, pre-Australia as per se, to say that I was actually very active with all of this all the way a long time ago, when really it hadn't even started. I'm not talking just Australia, anywhere else. And I guess one of the things that really I'm very interested in is, in fact, perhaps not so much about what we're doing, although we're doing some really good things, and both of you have shared that with the group that are listening in. I think it's about the people themselves. And what I want to really flag at the moment a little bit, and then have a discussion with you about it, is people who arrive who are new to Australia, and are coming from other countries. And people have come, I mean, I don't know how many generations any of you here from Australia, but they're wishing to have a sense of continuity, of tradition, of feeling as if it's still a place, or is a place that has meaning for them, having brought those traditions and things from another place, and how that's going for them. So not so much about us, but them, and how they may meet with us as part of the way forward for them to deal with things. And I think that many people don't. They just really want to sort of continue with what they've always done to the degree they can. So maybe in their houses, or maybe they may go to an open area, a park or something like that, to do the sorts of things that were and are for them a sense of identity. I really only want to flag on that and have any discussions with you about it. And I think that it relates a little bit, from my perspective, to the matter that we have in our list about guidance, essential aspects of heritage practice, the management, protection of safeguarding of sites. Well, we can do all of that, but really some of the sites are identity of other people. So, and I know that we all know that, but others may not wish or want to know that that's a key thing that we need, that they have a say. It's very important that they have a say about the importance places of their sense of continuity, identity in this new place. So I'm just going to flag that and not go on and on. I could probably add to comments on that. And as you know, I started very early with all of this around the world and finding out about people's important sites and how they were important as a sense of identity in their places, and then having new people arrive. And that probably gave me that thing, oh, what are we doing in Australia? We're all relatively new. How many? Well, of course, all humans came out of Africa, but that's another matter. And so I just flag it at that, and maybe we can have a discussion, because I've got a few things that I could add with. That's it from me at this stage.
Thanks, Marilyn. I think that really highlights. I mean, Australia is such a complex, culturally complex place, and isn't that a fantastic, a fantastic challenge for us, and an exciting thing to be involved with as heritage professionals, because in virtually every place that we work with, there are going to be aspects of intangible cultural heritage, and we may see them. We may have the eyes to see them, or we may not have the eyes to see them. We may need to be really engaging with the communities of that place, and communities multiple so often in Australia, rather than just a single community that we might find in some other countries that are perhaps less diverse than Australia. I reckon it's quite interesting to think about, is there enough in this charter? And we won't know till we've all really had a chance to look at it. But will there be enough in this charter to help Australian professionals work with those issues that Marilyn has raised, Do we need to review the Borough Charter? Do we need to review our practice note? Do we want to do other things? Do we want to lobby for Australia to be perhaps a signatory to the 2003 convention? I know that's a nice hot topic. How do we want to work with and effectively acknowledge First Nations people and their inherent authority over their cultural heritage in all its aspects? And might we move beyond fabric when we're working with place and ICH? Now, there's a big question as well. So thank you all for listening. And I'm really keen, if we've got time, to just open the forum to see if there's, comments and questions from others, and people want to take up some of those issues that Marilyn has raised as well. So thanks, Alex. Back over to you.
Pleasure. Thank you very much. So if you'd like to ask a question, just raise your hand or post it in the meeting chat. But given I have the floor, I'm going to take the opportunity to ask a question myself. Look, because this has been going on for 20 years and it is still considered a new field of interest, how do we communicate the new charter to people and how it might be utilised in their everyday work? Because we haven't been able to do it for 20 years, it would seem. So I don't want to see us here in another 20 asking the same question.
Oh, great question. I think that's really, that's fundamental, isn't it? We now have a charter. How is it going to get out into the hands of people who might use it? Is the format, and you probably can't see this, but like it's a double column kind of charter. It's a bit, it's a bit ugly. Is that going to be the exciting way to get it out? Or do we need, to chase down the illustrated Borough Charter, which was such a great success in Australia because of all the wonderful examples that were woven in? But again, a huge task. I really love it if people just, turned their microphones on and just jumped in. I shouldn't say that, should I? Your chair.
No, please do.
Well, I'm happy to jump in one sense, and again, it kind of drags me back to the bigger topic I was raising about the application of all of the many charters which we're bound to through our membership of the international organisation, and how they might relate to Australia. And I mean, I guess forgive me for not knowing the work of the NSC super well, but I mean the practice note, if I'm getting that right, was kind of a good lead into the subject for Australian colleagues about how they might think about ICH in terms of practice within Australia, and presumably it made beautiful connections to the Borough Charter or some such. I mean, I think it'd be a terrific thing if the NSC took up as a mission or a campaign to spread the word, to explain what it is, how it is that this international charter might apply within the Australian context. I mean, I'm getting kind of muddled thoughts, but I was just reflecting a while ago on, I mean, I had conversations with our Australian colleague, Michael Pearson, when he was chair of the Polar Heritage Committee, because like all good international scientific committees, once you've formed an international scientific committee, item one on the business of the ISC is to develop your own charter. And I tried to persuade Michael that maybe a charter wasn't actually needed. What was needed was a kind of linking document between international practice and the subject matter that they were wanting to talk about. And I guess maybe the same thing applies to the international charter. Maybe you could do a kind of multi-column, I mean, this may be too complex, but maybe you could do a multi-column thing which kind of has the international charter and then kind of has a kind of annotation about how is it that this might either link to or be a new idea for Australian heritage practice. I don't know. I mean, off you go. Your work is all before you.
I don't know whether you can hear me or not. Am I on?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just going to go the other way and say, and I think you all know it, one of the things that's incredibly important for this particular topic is the local people whose place it is or whose history it is or who whatever. And they might be recent people who have arrived, as I mentioned, and their say about it. I think that that's the thing. Now, we all know it, but in many cases it disappears and they're getting frustrated about it. I'm aware of that. So it's their value of maybe just an area which we all know and like as well, and they've arrived recently and they have a special sense of place because they've come from somewhere else, and it's very a continuity for them. I'll just leave it at that. Thanks.
Oh, thank you for saying that, Marilyn, because one of the things that Australia ICOMOS has never developed a practice note on is working with communities or working with people. It's been an issue for a number of us in our practice. You know, we have our own principles and ways of working, but there's really, it's very limited within Australia ICOMOS's guidance. And I think it's one of the problems that the area of social significance faces, is that people don't know how to work with communities, with other people in appropriate ways. And it's equally true here. Yeah.
Sure.
Chris, can I suggest that you feed that back into the executive committee as a task for it to think about and task somebody to do, not your IS, your NSC, of course, but
no, I think it has been fed back into
yes.
previous.
Yes, but as we know in the heritage field, lobbying is not successful based on, you know, a single communication. Quite often you have to be a bit persistent about it. And there's a new committee. And am I right in thinking that Caitlin's on this call, who might happen to be the president, you know?
Yes, that's correct. And it's certainly something of interest to her, I suspect. What are other thoughts from the group who's here? And Richard, I wonder, you know, from your experience with the NSC and with doctrine and the convention, you know, should Australia sign the convention? All of these issues. What are you thinking about?
Yes, I was thinking that there is this other thing now. The NSC's developed the practice note with its background note. We've now got this international charter from ICOMOS, and yet in the background that feeds into these things, but is yet not a reality in Australia. Australia hasn't signed the UNESCO ICH convention yet. That's sort of looming over us in another way too, because Australia ICOMOS and ICOMOS in general is only looking at the place dimension, the site, not the width of the ICH convention itself. So we're only looking at a narrow part of the ICH convention, and so there's a kind of grey area there of whether ICOMOS should move into, in some way, we're limited in a way, but should we be advocating more the Australian signing of the ICH convention, and what would heritage, from an administrative perspective at least, look like in Australia if the ICH convention is signed? So there are a series of things in there, but I won't talk about it further, but I think you can see.
We'll just look at what the others are doing with it, other countries.
Well, it's interesting that the UK has recently signed, which was a very, I don't know, from this distance, very unexpected.
It was. Yes, I think looking at other countries and how they're coping with it, some countries develop unique legislation, others try and welded onto the existing heritage structure they may or may not have in their country.
That's right. And I worked with many of them about that. But anyway, I won't go into all of that with
but
me.
it is a real issue in Australia. We have an existing heritage structure, which in some places, in some cases, depending on the jurisdiction, can ostensibly cope with ICH, but generally speaking, the jurisdictions can't cope with it. So there is a real issue on how ICH can be incorporated into Australian jurisdictions, the national as well as each state and territory.
Thanks, Richard.
Well, I mean, there is always that challenge about federal and state jurisdictions. I think now that we've conquered the, global jurisdiction, we should be able to do something.
Maybe one of the things is, what is the priority? Like, what would be a really, effective way of communicating about this charter, and what's our role in Australia? We don't have to do it for the whole world. We might have suggestions, but what are we going to do here? And there's a comment in the chat about case studies or explanations if there aren't enough cases built up. Just to to elaborate, to illustrate, to give examples. Yeah.
Well, I've given some, but they disappear. I don't know where they should be.
That's what happens with intangibles. I mean, Chris, can I suggest that Australia ICOMOS write off to the heritage chairs and officials of Australia and New Zealand to convey this new charter, and maybe even offer to introduce it to that group when they next meet, which will be in theory in Melbourne next year. I mean, it's a while off now, but that time will pass quickly. I mean, that's one way to introduce it to one audience who are operating in the heritage space in a significant way, and perhaps, I don't know whether Australia ICOMOS ought to write off to the other mob, meaning, is it the arts portfolio that has the Commonwealth Arts portfolio that has carriage of the ICH? I mean, that they should be aware of it as well.
Good point.
Yes, Duncan, I agree. I wrote a strategy paper for the executive of Australia ICOMOS some time ago now, and I did suggest that the chairs and officials was a major player in heritage, and that's a way of getting at all the jurisdictions in one go. If they can take it on board, then that's a good thing. There are several other bodies which are interested in international conventions too, of course, like Foreign Affairs and Trade, and arts you mentioned. So it's quite a broad lobbying that Australia ICOMOS would have to do. So I think we need to be quite strategic on who we approach in this.
Yeah. Well, chairs and officials grabs a whole bunch of organisations, and in particular, it now includes the chairs of Indigenous heritage agencies as well. So, and without, I mean, I was with the chairs and officials last week, and without breaching any confidences, there actually is a lot of conversation about the ICH issue. So this would be kind of very timely to feed in. It's a pity it's such a long time till the next chairs and officials, but it's a very timely contribution that ICOMOS can make, and Australia ICOMOS can make to those who work for agencies.
Yeah, sort of close, relevant. Yes.
And there's a lot happening in the Indigenous
Oh,
heritage reform space at the moment, which probably won't be as satisfying, I'm guessing, in terms of embracing ICH. But you know, there is a lot of kind of interest in that space in particular. So any opportunities to kind of feed this material into that process would seem like an opportunity as well.
Yes, that's a good idea. At the moment, it seemed to be a quite a separate process to the normal. And normal, I'm saying, I don't know whether that's something to continue, but a separatism has emerged in terms of promoting ICH, which undermines what has been, generally speaking, certainly from the Commonwealth within heritage, where the general three types of heritage environment, Indigenous, natural, and historic, have been considered together, whereas this separate approach is just looking at Indigenous. There are some obvious politics at work there, and I'm not saying they shouldn't be working, but I would think from an ICOMOS perspective, considering heritage holistically with the three types together, which is inherent in Commonwealth legislation as well as in some states and territories. So there is an issue there too, Duncan.
I totally agree. I was trying to do that years and years ago, and it all got whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there were reasons for some of that.
Absolutely.
Separate activity. You know, like the Commonwealth at Shipper Act is a particular piece of reform that needs to happen. But I mean, you know, there are opportunities here. I think the Commonwealth is working on an engagement or consultation
First Nations Heritage Engagement Standard that's going to sit across the EPBC and the ATSIPA Acts. Which speaks to, Chris, your point about engagement with communities. So it's come to the attention of pretty much everybody that there needs to be a formal approach that is embedded with free, prior and informed consent, so that both proponents and communities have a benchmark document from which to work about what appropriate engagement is, and guides FPIC as both a process and an outcome, which I can't stand, but that is the idea, this sort of two-pronged approach to it. And it's interesting that is happening within the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander sector, but not more broadly amongst other communities. So I'm hopeful that when we get the standard bolted onto one of those two pieces of reformed legislation, if we get those reforms through, that we can then start saying this is best practice for engagement with communities. So, you know, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders are a community, but we can use it more broadly when it comes to discussing intangible cultural heritage is what I'm hoping for.
Well, we've done a bit of it, but it's not worked out, and you're absolutely right. I mean, when I say worked out, it's tended to be individual areas, and rather than a sense of that's something we have to do everywhere.
Yeah. I think just to go back to a comment that Duncan made about sort of a multi-column kind of thing, but in a way, if we took the charter, and it will be available very soon. There were a few tweaks that needed to be made, some little editing things, and they have been done. So it should be on the ICOMOS website, and therefore can be, you know, on the Australia ICOMOS website very, very soon, etc. But to spend some time just picking out what is 5 things in this that Australia could improve its, you know, how it does things. You know, like not trying to do kind of everything, but what are a couple of things where we could really try and make a significant improvement in our practice, and taking those and giving those some, you know, energy and life. As Caitlin has said in the chat, that, you know, she's very happy to write these letters if someone else can assist with drafting them. But it is all about voluntary effort, as everyone on this session knows. So that's going to be, really important to sort of to pick our targets in Australia for the things that we want to change. There's a few other things in the chat too that others might be noticing, but certainly now I don't know the name of the person who is CBLA. Thank you for your comments. You should speak.
Hi, Chris. It's Catherine Brower.
Hello.
Hi. Hi, everyone. Sorry, I joined late. I forgot about daylight saving.
Oh, that's all right. But you made the comment that the Borough Charter has got such power and referred to in local legislation as the standard. So, is that a kind of something we should consider, getting it into a new version of the Borough Charter, updating that, or, just what tools do we use? I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, having lived with it all those years, writing it.
But as you mentioned, the illustrated Borough Charter, Chris, I don't know that that's a lot of work, but in between, like what Duncan said, but something case study illustrations, and it could be just sort of almost like an illustrated practice note case studies as a first go. I mean, it mightn't be too onerous. Nothing like sort of the visuals, the cases to really capture people who are not in the industry, but who you're trying to talk to explain how you'd like to have it included in practice, and when you're engaged by state or local government.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that if we take again Duncan's suggestion of let's look at the new charter and what we've already got and the Borough Charter, and just say what could we do and where might we put some energy for those, as an NSC, and then take that to Australia ICOMOS to say we'd like to put some energy in these areas. Are there other people within Australia ICOMOS who might like to join in that process?
I mean, a bit like the practice note, sort of expanded, enriched, some little landscape-y sort of format, sort of booklet, not very long, but just, I just think, I don't know what you'd call it, but it's sort of not a book like the Borough Charter Illustrated, but it's a start. Could help even just to explain within ourselves, with other heritage practitioners, but particularly all the clients and the communities, the people you're engaging with, why you're wanting to have ICH as part of our practice. So to me, you asked the 5 things. I think it's about, we need a tool that we can reach out to help us communicate to those non-practitioners sort of why we feel it's so essential that this becomes a standard part of practice.
I make a comment. I think that a key aspect of all of this, and I've thought it for quite some time, and we've talked about it, is it's not just about us. It's actually about the people whose heritage it is, and they may just be in a local area, and that connection rather than us coming in. Now, if they want help, yes, assistance in the sense of, all right, in some cases there's a group there, they've been there for quite a while, and then other people want to come in and take up that area and use it for something else. And that can be very stressful for that group, because the other group has come from another country or another part of Australia, and they're throwing a lot of money around, and it's not actually assisting them to have a sense of, this is our area and we want to continue with our sense of place, even if those other things happen. And I think that's something that we really could helpfully assist with.
Yeah, that's they're great. They're great examples. Hearing you both speak, I'm thinking about the guidance in Queensland, which is just a lovely kind of using the criteria, and it's a landscape format, and it's got some nice examples. It's just a little bit kind of better than a plain practice note, and a bit more, a bit better at communicating. So it takes a bit more effort, but this is about communicating. It's not about inventing new ideas. It's about communicating and sharing.
And standing all over them with our ideas.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Caitlin's added in the chat, presenting at various state heritage forums next year might be good as well. So yeah, getting that as an action.
Chris, and Marilyn, I fully support that. So I guess what the idea I had would be a document that's not internal for us. I mean, it would help professionals, but it's very much something that other people can pick up.
Yeah.
And it's not I'm not saying it's so simplistic. It is something there that puts down puts down all what we're talking about. But it's very much that even Marilyn, that one group could pick up and say to some other, whoever they're talking with, look, this is what we mean when we say we are attached to this place. And it's more than just that we're saying it. This is actually a legitimate international practice that we're talking about. So it's for them to pick up as well as ourselves to help us.
That's great. Thanks. More work.
Oh, yes.
I wonder if others who are on the call who haven't jumped in and spoken might want to jump in and say anything. Otherwise, we might be about to hand back to Alex and Rebecca. Not sure.
I might have a go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Apologies for my unstable internet earlier. I'll just sort of riff on some ideas that I'm having listening to the discussion. And I always feel quite unqualified in this space, but it's so I'm coming at this discussion as both a craftsperson myself, but also somebody who's doing research in this space, and just thinking about the early criticism of the convention and the compulsion to list and categorise and organise, and that didn't necessarily empower the people themselves, and how to legitimately empower people through these instruments. And so I'm just sort of thinking about, as you speak, how best to enable the agency of the knowledge bearers themselves. And I just keep coming back to the example that is the focus of my PhD research at the moment, as looking at traditional trades and traditional crafts, which is listed on the convention, as you would all know. So in Australia, though, however, even having our Talking Intangible session where we had fantastic speakers, a roof plumber and a stonemason, but speaking to them beforehand and introducing them to the concept, which was actually quite foreign to them. They, even though they're knowledge bearers, knowledge holders of this, they didn't actually have an understanding of that. And it's a tricky space in Australia, because even within my research, when I speak to some construction professionals and academics about wanting to acknowledge these fantastically generative and really vibrant knowledge systems, that as a legitimate form of knowledge, well then you do in the conservation space, you come up against criticism, of course, that's not science-based conservation. So it's not. So what the point I'm coming to is these ideas of inclusion and exclusion, and until we actually ratify the convention, are we going to continue down a road of creating our own informal lists of who qualifies and who does not? Like, if we're going to be adjusting the borough charter, I don't know. These are just really unformed thoughts, but there has to be some kind of structure to how we do this yet. I don't know how. I think really it has to be about it's such a professionalized discipline. This is just for me a place where we really, as professionals, and I'm in a complex. I'm wearing several hats, but it's about stepping back. It's about empowering those communities themselves. I don't know if anyone wants to take those ideas.
Good thinking.
Yeah, just here. I'm just cheering you on. I think that's so true. We need to learn, it is a highly professionalized field. It is a field, heritage has been long, a field where, evidence has been sought and where community attachment to place has been treated very poorly in many ways. So, I think it's, that's a big topic and a really worthwhile one. How do we step back? How do we step back and support when we need it, not intervene constantly?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's tricky.
Richard, did you want to jump in?
Not particularly. I support the complexity of what Rebecca was talking about there. I think we do need to consider the trades and professions in what we do, more so than we ever have. I guess that's partly what I was trying to say in terms, not about trades and professions, about complexity in terms of we're not at the best place at the moment to be promoting ICH in terms of the charter because the convention hasn't been signed. And again, we are not the prime body here. It's UNESCO, which should be promoting the convention, as well as international ICOMOS promoting it. We need to be dealing with it in Australia, but we're not at the ideal point yet. So we're kind of stopgapping, but we do need to approach and engage not just with communities, but with in a general sense, but the communities of trades and tradespeople and professions as well. So there are already bodies which relate to these many different areas in our Australian community that have ICH already. So there is an opportunity there, and I put this in the strategy I referred to previously. We need to engage with all of those to help carry us forward to a better way, a more comprehensive way of dealing with ICH in Australia. It's not just the administrators, it's not just the jurisdictions, governments, it's much wider. And it's a very complex strategy that's required to pick them all up. And Australia ICOMOS is not the only place that should be picking it up. So there you go.
Bravo.
I
agree.
Yeah. Very, very true. I guess we just need to go back and stand within our role and say what needs doing within our role. Yet we're not going to be able to consult with every organisation that in some way supports those with, or is an organisation of those with as holders of intangible cultural heritage. It's really, when you're dealing with place, how do you work with ICH? How do you open your eyes to it? And then, having opened your eyes, then how do you work with it? Yeah. I know that I noticed that Natsuko has just joined us on video, and so I wonder whether she wants to jump in and say something. So I imagine we're...
I did confirm that it's 6 o'clock Eastern Standard, but it's actually daylight savings. I logged in at 5:40, and it seems things are finished. So it was Sydney time, 6 o'clock. So again, yes, it seems, yeah, I'm the only one from Queensland, so I always get this, we don't change time, by the way.
Yeah, that's right. Queensland sticks, yes.
Is there anything
Yes, and it's very good when you have international meetings because anyway, yes, so I'm not sure how far what the
Did you want to add anything on the conversation that you've just been listening to, or because
I think what Richard mentioned about the narrow focus, I mean that it's basically because it's ICOMOS, it's about place. I think that's always been something that I felt from the beginning, that if it's the convention is much broader in a sense, and also in many countries or in many places, I think the administrative organizations, or I mean they're not just place-based people. Could be music or traditional music, or anthropology type groups. So I think when the government signs a convention, I think how does it fit with the national mechanism is going to be something that will be questioned, I believe. How is this going to be actually administered? Who's going to choose? Who's going to come up with the list, or who's going to? There will be a lot of questions. I think a lot of questions will be raised. So, whether Australia decides to sign a convention or not, I think even something is within something in relation to place, I think it's always worth working on it. In terms of like trade skills and construct, that kind of thing, which obviously in Japan, that's always been under the Intangible Cultural Heritage list. And there's extensive record and archives of that. And that's because that's not place, not only for place, because it's been transmitted and it's been used in other places as well.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, in terms of trade skill, when I was doing a long time ago, more than maybe 12 years ago or something, when I was doing my PhD, and I had a chat with a gentleman who was doing the tuck pointing. And he mentioned that he's never going to tell anyone. Apparently, he's one of the 5, and he said he will never let anybody know about how to do this other than his children, because it's a trade skill, and apparently it generates lots of income. That's understandable. So how do you, how are how is the mechanism going to deal with that kind of, or not, I mean, you don't have to deal, but how would those kind of situation be addressed, maybe? So I think there's a lot of things to think about.
Ultimately, it's about a recognition for those of us working with heritage that a community group or a family or something like that has a particular interest or tradition with a particular place. Maybe they've come from another country and they've now go to, as I said earlier, to that particular park because that's where they can continue those sort of sense of place of their tradition from the country they've come from, etc. And to be aware of that and recommend that those people have a say. It's not about us bossing them. It's about understanding and admiring, if you want to put it like that, their way of sense of place, whether they've been in this country for a very long time or recently arrived. It's not us to tell them what they can and can't do. It's about
Yeah, of
understanding.
course. No. I'm not sure if you misunderstood, or
No,
maybe
I know,
I
I'm not
I
arguing
never
with
said that. No,
you.
no. I'm just saying if the discussion is about in relation to signing the convention, then I think there will be some questions that might need to be raised.
Sorry, I was
And
talking about
obviously we don't have to sign a convention. And of course, respecting, that aspect of heritage is very important, because how are you going to fix, even like buildings, how are you going to fix this? Nobody knows how to fix them, even tools. So it's actually a very holistic, more holistic method.
Natsuko, if I can just respond to your tuck pointer example, which I think is a great one, to think about that heritage, ecosystem of site management and the procurement process, and why he might want to be protective of that knowledge, because having gone through many tender interview processes, when you're encountering a group of professionals, typically project managers and large commercial builders in my space, who want to extract that knowledge, they want to appropriate it, they want to put a capital value on it, they want to, they're talking about time and dollar, and they're talking about, in procurement, they're talking about managing projects on tight budgets, right? So they want to extract that specialist knowledge in order to then go to market and acquire that, to have that work carried out for a cheaper price, basically. That's it comes down to it. It's that's the sort of process that a lot of tradespeople are protecting against. So it's about within that system, and from when we're training people in universities, it's about within that system, striking a healthy balance between a collaborative project where we have project managers and architects and engineers working with those tradespeople, but acknowledging and attributing that specialist knowledge to the tradespeople, not just extracting and not just appropriating it, but working collaboratively with them in order to get the best outcome for the place. Because that tradesperson is bringing knowledge from all sorts of places. In a lot of cases internationally in Australia, people have travelled and they're bringing all these little pieces of the puzzle together to your place. And it's a really, exciting opportunity as well. I've been on a cherry picker all day today with a really knowledgeable stonemason. And in that administrative procurement process, so much of the possibility for that knowledge in quantifying it into line items and units units of capital and time and cost, you're extinguishing that intangible knowledge. Am I making sense?
I fully understand. I'm not sure. Maybe the way I explained wasn't good enough. But anyway, but that can be said.
No, it wasn't a criticism. I was just sort of trying to extend it.
What I'm trying to say again is, and that could be said with any industry, basically, even prints, the batik, or many industry, a lot of industry are saying it's not limited to builders or the things that you might be looking at. And that's why I think the intellectual property became a thing for people to discuss. So I think whether it's a building skill or craft skill, I think there is that something that some countries would think about it seriously. So I just wanted to say that it's not just the building, skilled craftspeople. It's and that's why it's because it's skill which is embodied in a person, and that's something. And then procurement, yes, but that could be said for other industry as well.
And I think that's why we have so much trouble with cultural heritage as a concept, because we talk about rights and we talk about property, and rights being implicit and interconnected with property rights and concepts of property. So the idea that something is intangible is very difficult. But
I just wanted to say it's not really a problem, but it's, if we problematize it, it becomes a problem. But it's not a problem. It's just my personal thing. I don't think it's a problem, but it's something that needs to be thought through carefully. That's all I'm saying.
I think that's one of the next steps for this committee, is that we now have, thanks to this fabulous discussion this evening, a great range of things that we can start thinking about, and forums through which we can start talking about the new charter. So I've taken a note of all of these comments and all of the suggestions about what we can do. We'll now write it up into a briefing paper, which we'll put on the website, and I've just posted the website in the chat. So keep your eye on that. We'll keep everybody informed, and with any luck, the recording of this session will have worked and we'll be able to put it up on the website, so we'll be able to all get back to this. But we're at time, and I would just like to thank all of our fabulous presenters, Chris and Duncan and Marilyn, for such a really fabulous investigation of the very dense way the bureaucracy works and the way that we get these things through and what the charter might mean for us all as practitioners, and the way it will help the communities that we work with. So thank you to them. Thank you for my other members of the NSC coordinating group. And that's it for this evening. So thank you for joining us, and I wish you all a good night.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye,
Alex. That's
everyone.
all. Bye.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.